What if the parts of you you're most ashamed of are the very parts that are trying to save you? What if the thoughts you suppress, the feelings you silence, the impulses you fear aren't evidence of your failure, but reminders of what you've forgotten? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden self, the part of you that got pushed into the dark so that the rest of you could be accepted in the light. And it's not just the bad stuff you've buried, not just the anger, the jealousy, the guilt. It's the creativity you were told was weird, the curiosity that annoyed your teachers, the boundaries you weren't allowed to draw, the grief you weren't allowed to feel, the wildness, the hunger, the intuition, the joy that didn't fit the script. So you adapted, you became what earned approval, what avoided conflict, what made people clap. Jung called it the persona, your social mask. It's not fake, it's survival. But over time, you confuse the mask for your face. You forget there's someone underneath. You smile when you're exhausted. You say yes when your soul says no. You laugh when something inside you wants to cry. And the world rewards you for it, but inside you shrink. And here's where it gets dangerous, because that repressed self doesn't die, it waits. It speaks in projection. It lashes out when no one's looking. It leaks into your relationships. It steals your peace. It clutches your chest at 3 a.m. It whispers, you're not living your life. You're playing a role in someone else's. The mask begins to crack. That's the moment most people try to fix the mask. More productivity, more perfection, more performance. But some stop running. They listen, and the voice says something strange. I'm not here to ruin you. I'm the part you left behind. I'm the self you buried to belong. And I remember who you were before the world trained you to forget. That's not evil. That's not weakness. That's your soul calling you back. So let me ask you plainly, if you've spent your life becoming who you were told to be, are you ready to remember who you actually are? The world is your mirror, and what you can't stand in others is usually what you've disowned in yourself. You say she's manipulative, but maybe it's your own hunger for influence, rejected because you were taught good people never want power. You say he's lazy, but maybe it's your buried exhaustion, screaming for rest. You say they're arrogant, but maybe it's your own unlived confidence, twisted in envy because you learned that pride is dangerous. Jung called this projection, and it's one of the most powerful and painful mechanisms of the unconscious. Until you see it, it controls you. You keep reacting to people who are just holding up mirrors. You fight shadows in others that are really your own. And the more righteous your anger, the more likely it's covering something you've refused to face. Robert Bly wrote, "We put all the parts of ourselves we can't accept into a long bag and drag it behind us. Rage, lust, weakness, desire, creativity, need, love. It all goes in the bag, and the bag grows heavier every year." But here's the paradox. What you put in the bag isn't just darkness. It's your life force, your insight, your fire, your edges, your boundaries, your soul's honest voice. And if you don't unpack that bag, it unpacks itself through burnout, numbness, emotional explosions, or subtle self-betrayal that nobody sees except you in the mirror. That mirror is terrifying because when you finally look, you don't just see what you dislike. You see what you could have been. The artist you silenced, the child you abandoned, the courage you traded for comfort. But here's the thing no one tells you. The mirror doesn't punish, it offers a way home. So don't flinch, don't blink, stay with it and ask the harder question, not what do I hate in them, but what part of me is afraid of who I really am? Because that's the beginning of integration. And integration is how we become whole, not by being light all the time, but by holding both the light and the dark. And standing in the center. That is the work. That is the path. That is what Jung meant when he said, I'd rather be whole than good. So the next time someone triggers you, pause. Not to judge, not to react, but to reflect. Because they might just be the mirror showing you the part of yourself that's begging to be reclaimed. You're not unraveling, you're remembering. That ache in your chest, that quiet dread, that strange sense that you're not where you're supposed to be, even when everything looks fine. That's the call to descend. And for most of your life, you've ignored it. You were told to stay on the surface, keep moving, smile, stay productive, be grateful. But some truths don't live on the surface. They wait below in the dark, in the place Jung called the unconscious. This is where your shadow lives. Not as a concept, but as a presence, a place, a locked room you've tiptoed around for years. But now the knocking is louder. The projections no longer explain the pain. The coping strategies don't quiet the noise. The cracks in your persona have grown too wide to tape over. And something in you says, it's time. This is not a metaphor. This is what descent feels like. You open the door you've been avoiding. You take the first step down into yourself. The light dims. The air thickens. Familiar thoughts begin to twist. Identity no longer feels solid. Time distorts. You are in the cave now. And the first thing you meet is not a monster. It's silence, but not the peaceful kind. This silence buzzes. It vibrates with everything you've suppressed. The things you said didn't matter. The needs you dismissed. The memories you left unnamed. And then something moves. It doesn't lunge. It watches. It knows you because it is you. The shadow is not abstract here. It has shape, temperature, breath, and it remembers everything you've tried to forget. This is the part of the journey that breaks most people, because it's not enough to have insight. You must feel what you buried. You must see the face you gave to no one, the rage you masked with kindness, the grief you numbed with busyness, the desire you disguised as selflessness. And if you flinch, if you try to spiritualize, rationalize, or escape, it only grows darker. But if you stay, if you breathe, if you let the silence speak, you begin to understand this is not hell. This is initiation, and this isn't new. In the Sumerian myth of Inanna, the Queen of Heaven descends into the underworld. At each gate, she is stripped of her crown, her robe, her power, until she stands naked before her dark sister. She dies there, symbolically, spiritually, ego dissolved, but after 3 days she rises, not as she was, as someone whole, and so do you, because the descent is not a detour, it's the path. The only one that leads to what's real. And though you're still in the dark, something is different. You're not running, you're listening. And in that listening, the shadow begins to change, because it's no longer your enemy, it's your mirror, and soon it will become your guide. This is where the winds come. Not outside you, through you. The thoughts you've held back for years come crashing in. The pain you've rationalized cracks through your chest. The memories you locked away rattle the walls of your mind like thunder. You're not healing, you're breaking open. And this is what real shadow work feels like. It's not aesthetic, it's not marketable, it's not a trend. It's a storm that doesn't ask for your permission. And most people, when it hits, retreat. They rebrand their ego and call it transformation. They mistake collapse for insight. They think wearing their darkness is the same as integrating it. But Jung warned us it is a dangerous mistake to identify with the shadow. You inflate rather than integrate. That's not evolution, that's ego in costume, because this work, it's not about looking deep, it's about becoming deep. It's about letting the ocean of unprocessed grief wash over you. Letting the scream you swallowed for years finally rise. Letting yourself feel the thing you've tried so hard not to feel, powerless. And it's in that moment, when you feel like you have nothing left, that the old identity begins to dissolve. The fixer, the achiever, the martyr, the one who's always okay, gone, and in the ash, something else waits, not salvation, recognition. There was a man once, a murderer. He had killed 35 people using black magic, driven by vengeance and rage. But the moment the bloodlust faded, something cracked. It wasn't guilt, it was grief, so he ran. Not from the law, but from himself, and eventually he found a teacher. a brutal wise man who refused to let him bypass the pain. For years he was humiliated, tested, stripped of every illusion. He built and rebuilt a tower only to have it torn down again. And when he was empty enough, ready enough, honest enough, he began the real work. He meditated in a cave for years, alone with his demons, starving, freezing, shaking, and he stayed. He faced every thought, every horror, every piece of his shadow, and when he emerged, he sang, not to boast, but because his soul had remembered its music. That man became Milarepa, one of Tibet's most beloved saints, not because he was pure, but because he walked through the storm and did not flinch. And you don't need to be a monk in a cave, but you do need to stay in the fire long enough for the masks to melt, long enough to stop calling your patterns personality, long enough to see what you really are, underneath the pain, underneath the past, underneath the persona. You're not broken, you're unintegrated. And the storm, it isn't the problem, it's the teacher. You're not out of the dark yet, but something has shifted. You're no longer crawling through it, you're standing in it. You're not begging for light. You've become the one carrying it. And that changes everything. This is the fire, not of destruction, but of purification. You've felt it, the burn in your chest when you finally admit what you want, the sting behind your eyes when you speak a truth you've never said out loud, the tremble in your hands when you stop apologizing for your own existence. This isn't breakdown, it's ritual. You are standing in the ancient fire that every soul eventually meets. And there's no turning back. Because the shadow you faced in the cave didn't just show you your wounds, it showed you your gold, the boldness you thought was dangerous, the sensuality you thought was shameful, the boundaries you thought would make you unlovable. And you've come to understand the shadow isn't just the repository of your darkness, it is the container of your wholeness. But to claim it, you must burn what no longer belongs to you, the false self, the borrowed guilt, the scripted personality, the mask of goodness you wore like a cage. You toss it into the fire and it hurts because you've built your life around those masks. You thought they were you. But as they burn, something underneath begins to rise. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And who you truly are is not the voice in your head that performs. It's not the role you were rewarded for playing. It's the deeper voice. The one you silenced as a child, the one that still whispers at night, the one you've been afraid to follow. That voice doesn't scream, it remembers. And it tells you this: you are not meant to be perfect. You are meant to be whole. The fire does not demand that you be good. It demands that you be true. And that truth is paradoxical. Because to feel powerful, you must be willing to feel broken. To feel free, you must first feel caged. To become light, you must carry your darkness with reverence. This is the paradox the mystics spoke of. Khalil Gibran wrote, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. The same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. You're not meant to choose one or the other. You're meant to hold both. And now, in this fire, you finally can. Not as opposites, but as siblings, as twins, as partners in your becoming. The fire becomes a forge, and you, scarred, stripped, softened, step out as something new. Not enlightened, but integrated. And integration is the quietest form of power there is. You don't return from this journey as a different person. You return as yourself for the first time. But it won't look how you imagined. You won't glow. You won't float. You won't beam with certainty. You'll still have fears, questions, scars. But something essential has changed. You are no longer at war with yourself. The shadow you spent your life avoiding no longer drags behind you. It walks beside you, quiet, loyal, watching, not as a threat, as a guide. You've entered the final paradox, the one Jung gave us not as an idea but as an invitation. I'd rather be whole than good, and now you understand why. Because goodness without awareness becomes a prison, a mask, a currency for love. but wholeness sets you free. You are not the light, you are the vessel that holds both light and shadow and still chooses love. You are not pure, you are real. You are not healed in the way people hope to be, tied up in a bow, free of pain. You are here, open, honest, still breaking sometimes, but no longer breaking alone. This is where the story turns outward, because now your work is not to become more perfect, it's to become more available to truth, to connection, to others who are still afraid of their shadow, to the friend who thinks their sadness is a flaw, to the stranger who believes they're too much, to the voice inside you that still trembles sometimes when you speak your truth. You carry your shadow now, not as a secret, but as a lantern, and your presence becomes permission for others to stop hiding, to stop performing, to stop pretending they're okay when they're not. This is how we change the world, not by erasing the dark, but by walking through it together. And so, if something in you is stirred during this journey, don't push it down. Don't rush to move on. Sit with it, write to it, speak it aloud, and when you're ready, tell your shadow, you don't have to scream anymore. I'm listening. And then do the bravest thing you can do. Let yourself be seen in the comments, in your journal, in your relationships, wherever your voice can reach, because there is someone out there still locked in the cave, still drowning in the storm, still thinking they're alone, and your story might just be the light they needed. This is not the end, this is the return. And the road ahead, you walk it as one, light and dark, wound and wisdom, mask and mirror, shadow and soul.